I gently placed the last few dollar bills into the worn envelope hidden in the back of my dresser. After 2 years of scrimping and saving, I finally had nearly enough for my 8-year-old son Ethan's corrective surgery. Tucking the envelope under a pile of old t-shirts, I smiled, imagining Ethan walking without pain. Nothing felt more certain than the promise I made to give him that chance. The morning sun filtered through the curtains as I got Ethan ready for school, his leg braces clinking softly with each determined step across the living room. "Soon, sweetie. You won't need these," I whispered as I knelt to adjust the straps on his thin legs. Ethan's big brown eyes sparkled with hope. "Really, Mom? The doctor said so?" he asked softly. I ruffled his sandy hair and smiled. "Yes, love. We just have to be patient a little longer." He threw his arms around my neck in a hug, and I held him close, silently vowing that nothing would stop me from keeping my promise to him. That certainty shattered later that afternoon. After work, I hurried home to grab the envelope and head to the hospital to make a deposit. Humming a lullaby, I opened the dresser drawer, only to find it empty. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Frantically, I flung aside clothes, searching every inch of the drawer. The envelope, the money, was gone. "No, no, no, no," I whispered, sinking to my knees amid the strewn clothes. This couldn't be happening. I tore through the house, pulling open every drawer and cabinet in a frenzy. I even emptied my bedroom closet, tossing aside shoeboxes and old purses in case I'd hidden the envelope there. Then I ripped the cushions off the couch and pawed through every shelf. With each passing second, my desperation grew. Finally, with my home turned upside down and my breath coming in gulps, reality set in. The money was truly gone. A wave of devastation crashed over me. 2 years of sacrifice and hope for Ethan, gone in an instant. My mind raced for answers. There were no signs of a break-in. My elderly neighbor had a spare key for emergencies, but I knew she would never enter uninvited, and no one else even knew about the envelope of cash. No one except my cousin Amanda. A chill ran through me. Amanda was like a sister to me. We'd grown up together, thick as thieves. I remembered us as little girls making blanket forts and whispering secrets, promising to always have each other's back. She knew how much that money meant for Ethan. She would never, or would she? Hands trembling, I tried calling her. Twice, 3 times, no answer, just voicemail. I left a single urgent message. "Amanda, please call me, it's an emergency." Then I phoned my mother, choking back tears as I told her the money was missing. She was alarmed and confused, but neither of us dared say what we were both thinking. After hanging up, I stood in my wrecked bedroom, anger and panic battling inside me. I thought back to the night before. Amanda had dropped by unexpectedly with cookies for Ethan. I left her alone for just a few minutes to switch laundry. When I returned, she was wandering near my bedroom hallway, looking startled as I came upon her. She'd laughed it off, claiming she was admiring the family photos on the wall. Now that memory made my blood run cold. 5 unattended minutes in my house. She knew exactly where I kept that envelope. I wanted to deny the awful suspicion, but the evidence was right there, an empty drawer, and a cousin who suddenly wouldn't answer her phone. I wiped the hot tears from my cheeks. If Amanda had truly stolen Ethan's surgery fund, it was the deepest betrayal I could imagine. I took a shuddering breath and steadied myself. For my son's sake, I had to uncover the truth, and if my fears were correct, I would make sure whoever did this, family or not, would face the consequences. By evening, with still no word from Amanda, my dread turned to outrage. I opened her social media page, and there it was. A fresh post from Paris. In the photo, Amanda stood beaming beneath the Eiffel Tower, a champagne flute in hand. She wore a chic new coat, a luxury handbag hung from her shoulder, and a shiny gold watch sparkled on her wrist. At her feet sat several upscale shopping bags. The caption read, "Dream come true. Paris has my heart. Blessed. Vacation mode." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting and a hot flush creeping up my neck. Just last month she'd complained she was broke. Yet now she was living it up in Paris? I scrolled further. Video. Clips showed off a lavish hotel suite with marble floors. Amanda twirling in front of the Louvre, her feasting on macarons at a sidewalk cafe. Each image hit me like a punch. It was my money funding this fantasy. The money for Ethan's future. Tears of fury burned in my eyes as I quietly took screenshots of everything. Evidence. As I saved each picture, a montage of memories flickered through my mind. Amanda patiently helping Ethan practice walking with his leg braces last summer, her arms steadying him, her sitting beside me at the hospital during one of his appointments, squeezing my hand and saying, "I'll help however I can. We're in this together." How could the same person do something so cruel? My chest ached as though my heart were splitting. In two. Half heartbreak, half fury. Heart pounding, I dialed Amanda. To my surprise, she answered on the third ring. Before she could say a word, I burst out, "How could you do this, Amanda? How could you steal the money Ethan needs and go to Paris?" She was silent for a moment, then let out a short laugh. "What are you talking about?" she said, feigning innocence. "I told you a friend invited me. I didn't steal anything." "Stop lying," I snapped. "You were the only one who knew about that money. I saw your posts, the designer bags, the champagne. Do you really expect me to believe some friend paid for all that?" Her tone turned icy. "I don't know what you think you saw, but you have no proof of anything," she shot back. "You're really accusing me? I get that you're stressed about Ethan, but that doesn't give you the right to throw crazy accusations at me. You're being ridiculous." I was shaking with anger. "How can you be so heartless? That money was Ethan's only hope to walk again." "I'm not doing this," she snapped, her voice dripping with scorn. "We'll talk when I'm back, and you've calmed down." Then she hung up on me. I stared at the phone, disbelief and rage swirling inside me. Amanda didn't even bother to pretend concern. She acted as if I were the one harming her by daring to confront her. "How dare you?" I whispered to the empty room, my jaw tight and my hands shaking with fury. Wiping away furious tears, I looked back at the photos of her Paris adventure. It was all the proof I needed of her betrayal and her audacity. She thought she could dismiss me and get away with it. I closed my laptop, my resolve hardening. If Amanda wanted a fight, I would give her one. I was done begging for answers or mercy. I would make sure she was held accountable. Every flashy post and every lie would be brought to light. My cousin had stolen my son's future out from under us, and I was going to do everything in my power to set things right. Over the next days, I began my fight for justice, and quickly hit obstacles. At the police station, I explained the theft to an officer and showed him the evidence I'd gathered. He was sympathetic, but explained that without solid proof or an admission of guilt, it was basically my word against Amanda's. They could file a report, but an arrest would be unlikely unless I found more evidence. I left the station frustrated and deflated. Facing my family was no easier. When I met with Aunt Carol, Amanda's mother, hoping for help, I was met with denial. She refused to believe her daughter would steal from me. "You must be mistaken, dear," she said, lips thin with disapproval. She even suggested that Amanda had a good job and maybe some savings I didn't know about. If money was missing, perhaps Amanda could quietly pay it back in installments once she was working again. No need to ruin her career or our family's good name by making a fuss. I realized her priority was protecting the family's reputation, not helping Ethan. Anger burned in me. If Amanda really wanted to make it right, she would have returned the money already, I told her, my voice trembling. "My son's future is at stake. I won't just sweep this under the rug." The conversation ended with my aunt glaring and showing me to the door. It was clear I was on my own. I sat in my car outside her house, gripping the steering wheel, and finally broke down. I sobbed until I had no tears left. I had never felt so betrayed or so abandoned. How could my own family do this to us? Still, beneath the despair, a fierce resolve sparked. If my family wouldn't help me, I would fight for Ethan on my own. As the days went by, word of the dispute spread. Some relatives urged me to let it go for the sake of family harmony. One cousin texted me, "Family comes first, Sarah. Maybe you can find another way for Ethan." Their words felt like betrayal on top of betrayal. Family should put Ethan first, I thought, not protect the person who hurt him. Still, a few stood firmly by me. My mother called every day to check on me, enraged at Amanda's actions and telling me to stay strong. My younger brother Tom insisted I do whatever it took to get justice, and even offered to help with expenses if I needed a lawyer. Late each night after I put Ethan to bed, I sat at the kitchen table meticulously documenting everything. I compiled the screenshots of Amanda's Paris spree, noted every interaction, and printed out the text in which Amanda had warned me to stop slandering her. Her audacity in trying to cast herself as the victim only fueled my resolve further. I researched lawyers and the possibility of filing a civil lawsuit if the police wouldn't act. Every time exhaustion or doubt crept in, I would peek into Ethan's room, watching him sleep, his small legs curled up without the cumbersome braces. Reminded me exactly who I was fighting for. The image of him walking and laughing without pain steeled my resolve anew. No matter how many people dismissed me or how long it took, I was determined. I would not let Amanda get away with this. I would fight for my little boy's future, even if I had to stand completely alone. Sure enough, Amanda's charade soon crumbled. She had lied to her employer about a family emergency to get time off for Paris, but her co-workers saw her vacation posts. When she strolled back into work, she was fired on the spot for dishonesty. I took no joy in hearing about her job loss, but I felt a grim sense of justice. Amanda's perfect little facade was cracking at last. Word of her outrageous theft spread beyond our family. Amanda tried to save face on social media by claiming she was taking a much-needed career break, but the damage was done. People in need, our community began to whisper about how she had really funded her trip. Under that optimistic post of hers, I even saw a former co-worker comment, "Some break, huh? Did your family emergency get resolved in Paris?" My cousin Lisa even called me, furious on my behalf. "Amanda's telling everyone you're lying," she exclaimed. "But with her getting fired and all, people are starting to wonder if you're right." It hurt to hear that Amanda was spreading lies about me to anyone who would listen, but at least the truth was finally catching up to her. Her once bright reputation was in free fall. About 2 weeks after her return, there was a knock on my door. It was my Uncle James, Amanda's father. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a matter of days. Inviting him in, I noticed his eyes were red and weary. He cleared his throat and pulled out an envelope, pressing it into my hands. Inside was a cashier's check for the full amount of the stolen money. With a shaky voice, he said, "We are so sorry, Sarah. Please, we want to make this right. This is for Ethan. Just please don't drag this to court." His anguish was palpable. For a moment I saw not the defensive father who had initially protected Amanda, but a man broken by his daughter's actions. Tears of relief sprang to my eyes as I realized Ethan's surgery fund was restored in full. I thanked my uncle sincerely. This check meant my little boy's chance was no longer lost, but I also gently told him I couldn't promise to keep this out of the legal system. "I appreciate this more than you know," I said, voice soft. "But you have to understand, what Amanda did nearly destroyed us. I can't just pretend it never happened." He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I understand," he murmured. He left with a final apology, shoulders hunched in sorrow. I believed he truly meant it. That evening, I deposited the check at the bank. Seeing the funds back in Ethan's medical account lifted an enormous weight from my shoulders. I sat in my car afterward and sobbed, a mixture of gratitude and grief. Grateful that the money was back, grieving that my own cousin had driven us all to this point. Amanda, meanwhile, had gone quiet. With no job and public shame closing in, she retreated from sight. She didn't reach out to me at all, not to apologize, not to explain. Perhaps she was too ashamed. A mutual friend told me she was practically in tears every day, panicking, now that her life was in shambles. Or perhaps she still thought she had done nothing wrong. Either way, I was done waiting for her to do the right thing. I had the money back, but now I was more determined than ever to make sure she faced justice for what she had done. Several weeks later, the police, now armed with all my evidence and the returned funds, decided to formally charge Amanda. A court date was set, and I steeled myself for the legal battle ahead. A few months after the theft, Amanda finally faced the law. In a small courtroom, Amanda stood at the defendant's table fidgeting with her hands. She looked shrunken and pale, a far cry from the carefree woman in those Paris photos. She was formally charged with theft and fraud. I closed my eyes as tears of relief stung them, a mix of sorrow and vindication washing over me. In exchange for her plea, Amanda was spared prison. The judge sentenced her to 5 years of probation and hundreds of hours of community service, and ordered full restitution, money which her parents had already paid on her behalf. Before concluding, the judge delivered a stern rebuke. "You nearly robbed a young boy of his future. You should be utterly ashamed." Amanda nodded faintly, eyes on the floor. As I left the courthouse, my mother pulled me into a tight hug. "It's over," she whispered. I let out a breath I felt I'd been holding for months. It was truly over. Nearby, I saw Amanda with her own parents. Aunt Carol kept a supportive arm around her daughter as they hurried out. Amanda glanced in my direction briefly, her face chalk white and streaked with tears. In her eyes I thought I saw regret, or at least humiliation. I had no words for her, and she offered none to me, and that was fine. The time for apologies had passed. What mattered was that justice had been served. The family rift would take time to heal, but at least now there was a chance. The nightmare was officially behind us, and I could finally turn the page and focus on healing. A few weeks after the court case, the day of Ethan's surgery finally arrived. I sat beside him in the stark hospital pre-op room, the smell of antiseptic in the air. A heart monitor beeped steadily in the corner as I stroked his hair and tried to keep my voice upbeat. He looked up at me with a mix of nerves and hope. "Mom," he whispered, "after this, will I be able to run?" I felt tears prick my eyes as I smiled. "That's what the doctor says, sweetheart, and I believe him." I gave him a kiss and squeezed his hand. "You're going to be just fine, I promise." I watched as the nurses wheeled him through the double doors to the operating room, his small hand waving at me until he vanished down the hall. The hours that followed were some of the longest of my life. My mother sat next to me in the waiting room, holding my hand in silent support. Each minute felt endless. I clasped my hands and prayed under my breath, picturing Ethan running across a playground someday, trying to hold on to hope. At last, the surgeon emerged with a gentle smile. "The surgery went very well," she said. "We corrected the issue. With some physical therapy, I expect Ethan will be able to walk, and even run, normally." A sob of relief burst out of me. I covered my mouth and cried, overcome with gratitude. My mother and I hugged tightly, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. It felt like a miracle. 2 weeks later, back at home, Ethan took his first steps without braces. We were in our living room when he announced he wanted to try walking to me. Heart pounding, I stood a few feet away from him. He pushed himself up from the couch, balanced, and then put one foot in front of the other. One step, then another. "Mom, look! I'm doing it!" he yelled, giggling. Tears blurred my eyes as I opened my arms. "Keep going, Ethan. I'm right here." He wobbled a bit on the third step, but he didn't fall. In moments he closed the gap and fell into my arms, laughing with pure joy. I hugged him gently, careful of his healing legs, and we both dissolved into happy tears. Our little dog raced around us in excited circles, barking as if he understood our joy. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered into Ethan's hair. It was the happiest moment of my life. In that moment, every hardship of the past months was worth it. The money I had saved was back where it belonged, giving my son a future. Ethan's laughter as he walked across our home was proof that we had overcome the nightmare. That night, I tucked Ethan into bed, his legs free of braces, a hopeful sparkle in his eyes. "Thank you, Mom," he murmured sleepily. I felt my heart swell. "For what, my love?" I asked softly. "For never giving up," he replied, already drifting off. I watched him sleep for a long while, reflecting on how far we had come. Our family had been fractured by betrayal, and some relationships might never be the same. But here in this little bedroom was everything that truly mattered. We had triumphed over deceit and despair. Justice was served, hope was restored, and my little boy had his life back. As I crawled into my own bed, exhaustion finally gave way to peace. For the first time in months, I slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that Ethan was safe, our nightmare was over, and we were moving forward, one hopeful step at a time.